Afternoon, Gerard and Rhino in the studio, and now joining us, the sheriff of Jasper County and also the president of the Mississippi Sheriff's Association, Randy Johnson, and my good friend Bryan Bailey, the sheriff of Rankin County, in the studio. Appreciate you gentlemen joining us this morning. Good morning to you, or afternoon to you.
Good morning, sir. Glad to be here.
Good afternoon.
Absolutely. So, right off the bat, guys, wanted to talk to you about the efforts in this country to try to defund the police, and in particular in Washington, also wanted to discuss the plans there to reform law enforcement in this country. I know the popular word that Rhino and I like to make fun of, frankly, is reimagine. I don't exactly know what the hell that means, but I get scared when I hear about that with respect to, a little disturbed with respect to law enforcement. You haven't heard a lot about that in our neck of the woods, but certainly this is sweeping our country, this sentiment, and coming out of Washington, and it is of concern. Sheriff Johnson, your thoughts about that?
I think it's crazy. You know, where you hear it mostly are the big cities and everything. In my county, the sheriffs, we're the last stronghold. We're here for the people, and we're going to do what we got to do. I don't know what's going to happen in the cities where you have these groups that run everything. You know, in the county, we're the top law enforcement guy. We answer to no one but the voters.
Yeah. And we're seeing in those cities that are really changing the way law enforcement's done. First, we're seeing police officers leave the force. We're seeing a problem recruiting new law enforcement officers.
Oh, yeah.
Big problem with that. But we're also seeing the crime increase. I mean, why are we – and then we're surprised. There's people who are surprised at that support this effort. They're surprised at the increase of crime. How much is a deterrent is the fact that law enforcement officers are on the streets, are out and about in the communities? When the bad guys know about that, doesn't that deter crime? Isn't that the main purpose? We don't really want crime. We want to deter it.
Yes, sir. Being seen and being out, you know, is one of the greatest deterrents of crime we got. But like you said, it's getting harder and harder every day to find people that want to come into law enforcement, and I truly see why. I've been in it 36 years, and man, it's changed so much over those times.
Are you experiencing any problem with that, Sheriff Bailey? How are you recruiting officers now for the Sheriff's Department in Rankin County?
Yeah, luckily, I guess we're blessed in Rankin County that, you know, I have a little bit bigger department. I have a little bit better benefits and things to offer. So we are still able to recruit some people. But how we usually like to do the sheriff's offices, about over half the deputies either start out in the jail or dispatch, work their way up, and then we'll send them to the police academy. So we're actually struggling now to find jailers and dispatchers. And again, the jail never sleeps. I mean, it's 24/7, 365 a year. And that's where, you know, a lot of times you see a young person's work ethic and how they perform, and that's what we promote up out of. But, you know, we've had to reach out to other departments now and recruit from other departments.
And have you seen an increase of crime, decrease of crimes, especially over the last year with the pandemic? And frankly, this all really got legs with the George Floyd incident last year. I mean, that's really focused on law enforcement more than ever, I think, in this country. What are you experiencing in Rankin County?
Again, in Rankin County, I sort of think of it as like the Alamo sometimes. I think that, you know, the people in Rankin County, they still want a safe place to live, work, and raise their children.
Sure. And
they like the job that law enforcement overall is doing in Rankin County. And, you know, that's something else about accountability and law enforcement is, you know, your sheriff is directly accountable to the public every 4 years. If I'm not doing my job, any sheriff's not doing his job, they're going to change sheriffs every 4 years. So, you know, we're the only ones that are directly accountable to it. But as far as crime-wise, I have seen a difference. It seems like our house burglaries went down because everybody's at home during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But our auto burglaries went up.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And your fraud, internet fraud theft has gone up.
Well, how about you, Sheriff Johnson, and what are you hearing from the other sheriffs across the state with respect to the level of crime in the state?
It's kind of like Bryan was saying. I have a rural county, so Mine's about the same.
Okay.
I mean, we still have our weekend thieves that go around, steal out of carports, things like that. Drugs are a problem, but if the government keeps going like that, that's not going to be a problem for us.
Right.
But mine hasn't changed that much. It's the same, and unfortunately, it's the same people. And they do these justice reform bills where they let them out earlier and they cut the time. I don't agree with all that, but it does have its good points. And Brian's got a great deal at his jail where he helps these inmates get back out. But I don't have the funding and stuff like Brian does. So, we just take care of business in our county, and, people rely on us, and they look for us for help, and we're going to do it.
What about since Joe Biden's essentially opened up the borders, has that had an impact on human trafficking? Has there been an increase of that in our state that you're aware of? We had Chief Dean Scott from Pearl on last week talking about that. That situation certainly flowing through the metro area, but are you hearing anything about that?
I'm not. No, sir, I don't. I hear every now and then, a city will get somebody, but no, sir, I'm not hearing a lot.
Sheriff Bryan Bailey?
Interstate 20 runs right through the middle of Rankin County, so I do have a criminal interdiction team that works out there. So they have seen an increase in the human trafficking on their traffic stops. I know they've contacted INS on a couple of occasions that they've detained some people. But I have seen what I believe is a small increase.
Sheriff Johnson, the cries from those who seem to be most vocal about defunding, in some cases even abolishing law enforcement, which is insanity in my view. The cries are, and the basis for that is, well, it's got to be dismantled and rebuilt because law enforcement in this country is systemically racist. Your thoughts about that? I personally don't see it. Can you help us with that?
I think that's way off. It doesn't matter who you are or what. It's whoever's violating the law is who we deal with. And I don't buy racism at all. I know it's not in the county I live in, but there again, you got these cities that are pushing agendas that don't fit in Mississippi and don't fit where I live. So.
And I know, Sheriff Bailey, it may sound like a crazy rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. You don't have meetings with your deputies where you say, okay, well, let's treat the black people different than the white people. But that's what they project. I mean, that's the message, the narrative coming out of those that think we got to tear down the police departments.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when that 911 call comes in for people requesting that, we don't know what color they are. We don't care what color they are, And I'll tell anybody, I have a bias against people, but anybody want to come in Rankin County and commit a crime, you're going to have a problem. I don't care what color you are.
So you're biased against criminals, essentially, in crime.
That's right.
Which is what it is. So, one of the things that their legislation at the bills at the federal level that would reform policing in this country, and one of the key elements of that legislation would be to end qualified immunity, which protects law enforcement officers from civil lawsuits. Sheriff, I see he signed there. What's your thoughts about that, Sheriff Johnson?
Well, it's hard enough to get people to come into this profession now. And if they do that, it's really going to make it hard. And what people don't understand, this doesn't just affect law enforcement. It's nurses, hospital, city workers, librarians, anybody that works for a city or a state or county government. It opens them all up. We have a job to do, and if we have to start thinking before I get involved in this and do this, before this guy, do I let him go ahead and kill somebody or do something, or do I go ahead and act on it and worry about it later?
Yeah.
If they do that, it's gonna totally destroy our law enforcement and the people coming in. It's not gonna work.
Another element is to prohibit in this. It's called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. This is authored by the Democrats, and it says to prohibit racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling by law enforcement. We got a break right here, and I get your response to it when it comes back. But when we come back, but this isn't happening in law enforcement, is it? You're not. Are you profiling people based on their religion and stuff?
We're profiling criminals.
Okay. I just want to get that on the record. It just sounds crazy to me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, someone that's in the trenches doing the job of law enforcement every day. We got a break. We're going to come back. We've got Sheriff Randy Johnson and Sheriff Bryan Bailey in the studio. Sheriff Randy Johnson, he's the president of the Mississippi Sheriff's Association and the sheriff of Jasper County, and also Bryan Bailey, my good friend, the sheriff of Rankin County. So, gentlemen, we were talking about this proposal to end qualified immunity for police officers in this country coming out of Washington. And you were sharing with me off the air there during the break, Sheriff Johnson, your sentiments on that. You told me, sir, that you serve because you enjoy what you do, and that you've got a number of years in. You could retire today if you wanted to.
Yes, sir. I've been in this 36 years between the state and the county law enforcement. And if it gets to the point we have to start questioning things before we're able to do our job, I won't stay here. I mean, I love this job, and I love being sheriff and serving the people of my county. And I don't want to leave. I'm not. I have no intentions right now. But if this qualified immunity goes, it's going to open so many doors and lawsuits on me because I hire these deputies, because they're going to sue the county and everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be worth it.
Sheriff Bailey, your thoughts on it?
Well, on the qualified immunity, first off, I want to say that a deputy sheriff or police officer, you're asking an imperfect person to do a perfect job. And it's never going to happen. They're never going to do a perfect job. And for the average citizen out there who doesn't understand this concept of qualified immunity, what we're talking about is a deputy goes to a domestic call, a husband, wife in a fight. The husband has a gun. He draws aims the gun at the deputy. The deputy shoots, jerks the trigger and misses. The bullet goes through a sheetrock wall and hits their 10-year-old daughter in the next room and kills her. Well, right now, it's qualified immunity. The officer did not intend to harm that child. There was no ill intent at all.
Sure.
And so there's really nothing can happen because of that mistake or that accident. Well, you take away qualified immunity, that family could turn around and sue the deputy, and then turn around, because the deputy works for me, and I have 110 of them. They're not expecting to do a perfect job. They could turn around and sue me. So why would I jeopardize my 30-some-odd years in career? I'll just go ahead and get out,
And I think this assumes that there's just widespread abuse by police officers, by law enforcement officers, knowing that I have qualified immunity so I can just be reckless. I mean, do you witness that? Do you see that?
No. As a matter of fact, the sheriff and I are both directly elected by the public. I promise you, our bad apples, we're going to find out quick, and they're going to be gone quick. Nobody's going to mistreat anyone. I tell my people when I hire them, you be nice to everybody till they give you a reason not to.
It makes sense. Makes sense. But there's this perception, at least out there, a misconception. There's just widespread, just bad behavior amongst law enforcement officers. I just don't see how that could be any different than it is in any profession. And what I know about good, respectable people, regardless of the profession, it doesn't matter if it's law enforcement or name some other industry. The good people, they want to root out the bad people because they negatively impact the organization as a whole.
Well, you look at the hundreds of thousands of interactions between police officers and the public every day, and you look every couple of weeks there'll be one bad one, and that's the one that gets all the attention. We never hear about the hundreds of thousands of other good interactions that happen, the good things the police officer did. It's always something bad, and I blame the media in part for that to just focus on the bad. And I tell you this, and it sort of still shocks me, I've got the past 4 or 5 years, I've gotten a lot more compliments on my deputies than I have complaints.
Of course. And would expect that. And we talked about it, Rhino did yesterday, the situation that occurred in New York where a female police officer for the New York Police Department rushed a 4-year-old to safety, went and grabbed a 4-year-old and picked it up and rushed it to safety. Bullets were ringing out. I think it was in Times Square, wasn't it, Rhino, as I recall? And this officer rushed in, and you don't hear about that, and that didn't make a lot of the media, but it did make some. You guys are doing this in your people every single day, are you not? It's not all about going after criminals and that are doing something bad. I know you folks are doing good stuff for the people.
Changing tires on the side of the road, unlocking cars, yes, sir.
Every day. And don't sweat it, and do it gladly, happily, and proudly, knowing that's part of their duty. Yet you get a bad rap. And that's why I wanted to have you guys on today, because We never hear about those things, but there's good stuff happening every day, and we need to highlight it more and more. You know, what do you think about the sentiment that I've been talking about across this country, that it just paints police officers and law enforcement in general in such a negative vein? Hopefully you guys don't see a lot of that in the state of Mississippi, do you?
I don't see that at all in my county, and I don't see it in Mississippi. But, you know, you look at the news, you see it in California, Oregon, Washington, places like that. But no, sir, I'm like Brian. I've had more people in the last couple of years tell me how much they appreciate what we do and how thankful they are that we're here.
Good.
And I love Jasper County. I love those people there, and that's why I do what I want to do. That's why I'm in this office.
Sure.
We provide a service, and we're here to help them, not hurt them.
And makes total sense. What would you say, Sheriff Bailey, you need from the judicial system, from the court system, or from the incarceration system? What in particular do you think would be helpful to getting your job done more effectively to serving the people of Rankin County? Anything come to mind there?
Yes, sir, and I know that a lot of people think that I'm a conservative Republican sheriff from Rankin County, but I tell you, I have a great program in place in Rankin County. Doesn't cost the state taxpayers a dime. It's a sheriff's trustee program.
Yep.
We work with the judges and the DA's office, but I'd really, if we want to spend money, we really need to reinvest in the Mississippi Department of Corrections. And, it's like somebody had a great idea. Let's take a community college, put a fence around it, and make it a prison. Let's give these people a skill. Mm-hmm. So when they return back to the free world, they can survive.
Mm-hmm. Well, Commissioner Kane looks like he's really hitting it.
I think he's doing great things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I wanted to hear is whether or not you think we're on the right track.
Yes, sir.
There.
No doubt.
Okay. Good. In Mississippi. So, one of the things that this George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would do is create a national police misconduct registry to prevent police officers who are fired or pushed out for bad performance from being hired by other agencies. You got any particular thoughts on that, Sheriff Johnson?
I don't know that we need a database for it. If I have another officer, I'm going to call the sheriff of the city or wherever he worked and do a background. I hired a guy from California, sight unseen, and he sent me a application, and we did that. And I spoke to some people in California and him, and I found out why he wanted to come here and what he was like, and it was great. But I don't think we need a database. I think the sheriffs ought to be able to call and get the information they need from the other sheriffs. You call me about a guy that I had, my favorite thing is I wouldn't hire him again, and that's as far as I go. I don't talk about him.
Right.
But,
that's all you got to say.
Yeah, I have a spot if he wants to come back.
Sure.
But I don't think a database is right.
Something else they want to do is ban no-knock warrants in federal drug cases and ban chokeholds. Any thoughts about that, Sheriff Bailey?
Well, I'm hoping in this day and age with the way technology is advanced in law enforcement, every deputy I have, I don't know about the rest of the sheriffs across the state, but every deputy I have has a taser, has pepper spray. And finally we've decided on a body camera, so we'll have body cameras. So I don't know that there's too many situations. I would rather them tase somebody or mace them than lay hands on them this day and age.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the technology continues to improve, tools that you are given to your officers, and assume you guys are training them on how to use these tools, and you update your policies and your practices to reflect those tools in place. It just seems to me like it's a lot of fuss. It's a lot of unnecessary federal law that would intervene into the way you conduct your affairs in your departments. That's what bothers me.
Sometimes the tasers aren't effective, or they miss or whatever, and then it gets to that point where you have to do that. And I think part of that George Floyd thing is where you have to include in your policies that a chokehold is now use of deadly force.
Yeah.
And, if they tase somebody or it doesn't get them and you have to get hands on them, we're going to do what we got to do to get out of that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit there and think, now, don't put a chokehold right now. It's not appropriate. But, it escalates so fast and things change so fast. It's just, I don't understand.
And you've shared some advice with me off the air, Sheriff Johnson, about what a person should be if approached by police officers to prevent all this that we're witnessing in our country.
Yes.
Tell our audience that. We got a second here.
Sure, if they would just comply with the order that we're given. Don't try to argue on the side of the road. Comply. That's what's court for.
Makes sense. Sheriff Johnson, Sheriff Bailey, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you, gentlemen, in your departments for your service to your counties in the state of Mississippi.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. We'll be right back with more here on the JT Show.